Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, still just a little bit under the weather, but I know you guys look forward to talking Steelers football, and there's a lot of things going on off the field, actually, that I wanted to address. Well, either they're happening or not happening. Depends on, well, glass half empty, glass half full. Which side of the coin are we looking at? And I want to go right into this and talk about Keenan Lewis gets released by the New Orleans Saints last Friday, I want to say, or sometime over the weekend, and I am no stranger to speculation and just the hypothetical situations and whatnot. And I know Keenan Lewis was banged up. I know he's 30 years old, but I've also been the one that's like, hey, this is the guy that we let him go. We let him get away. And he's had up and down years with the New Orleans Saints. Some of that may be attributed to actually some of these injuries that were piling up. However, it's not as though the Pittsburgh Steelers situation in the secondary is so rock solid they could ignore a player who was formerly a solid contributor to their defense. This was a young man who got to play, I want to say it was his fourth year in the league. He was a 16-game starter, and of course on that rookie deal parlayed that into a lot of money over in New Orleans, though some feel that the money that was spent by the New Orleans Saints could have been matched by the Steelers, but the Steelers just struggling enough. They weren't even able to keep William Gay. He left for that 1 year to go to Arizona and then returned after Keenan Lewis left. So the Steelers were always struggling with the salary cap, kicking the can down the road. Of course, I'm not going to proclaim to be the major salary cap expert. I just know that they had a raw deal with Lamar Woodley, and then they awarded an awful lot of money to Cortez Allen the following year, and that's one or two deals right there that if you get them wrong, it's very hard to fill in with any other players. So Keenan Lewis leaves. He gets a 5-year, $25.5 million contract with the New Orleans Saints, which included a $6 million signing bonus and $10.3 million in guaranteed cash back in 2014. Played only 6 games last year with the Saints, supposedly has some hip problems, but Lewis comes on Sirius NFL XM radio. I'm always butchering that, and let me tell you, when your throat is on fire trying to say it, try saying that. It's the NFL radio show that's on satellite radio, and Keenan Lewis calls in. He had about a 2-3 minute segment with the host. I don't remember which host it was, but he asked specifically about what's going on with your health, and Keenan basically says, don't believe any of the reports that you've heard. There isn't anything major with like a knee or anything like that. I'm working with one of the top trainers, etc., etc. So while all this is going on, and I'm thinking to myself, don't talk about Keenan Lewis, don't write about Keenan Lewis. Well, I got this big piece about Keenan Lewis up on SteelCityUnderground.com. I could not wait any longer. I know my peers sometimes make fun of me for being so speculative, but let me tell you, when I wrote about Lamar Woodley, he did about the same thing. He comes on the radio. He says he still wants to contribute. He says he could still play and be a factor for someone's team. But a lot of people were anti the whole Woodley thing. Some said yes, some said no. I was only merely suggesting that the Steelers, if they have a need at edge rusher, and I would assume they're not set anywhere right now. You have Bud Dupree still hurt, nursing a groin injury. We haven't seen Jarvis Jones out there yet in the preseason. We're rolling with James Harrison, who's 38 years old, and just, he just keeps kicking Father Time in the face and pushing him back another year to play in this league, which is just incredible. And then you have Arthur Moats, who I love Arthur Moats. Behind them, you have a bunch of guys that aren't proven. Anthony Chickillo, I mean, what else can you say? And I think Anthony Chiquillo is going to end up being a solid player, but right now he's just a special teams contributor. We really don't know what you have behind those two guys. You got to hope that the other guys get healthy, but that was pretty much just speculative. You know that Woodley's been banged up really bad. We've talked before about Will Allen. Myself and Eric Herman have mentioned how the Steelers could dip into the need for a veteran presence in the secondary. And we're not saying we want Will Allen to be a starter, but we said he's still there in case they need him. And with all these injuries that are piling up in the secondary, you got Artie Burns, who may still not get on the field for this third preseason game against the New Orleans Saints on Friday. You still have Senquez Golson, who now, some conflicting reports, he said he could be back as early as, I forget the exact number, but I figured it out to be mid-October. And then you have others saying he won't be back until like November. Well, if the guy, that's almost the whole season. And if the guy can't get on the field, get out there and practice, I don't know if does he have any value if he hasn't played in 2 years and hasn't even seen any preseason, any exhibition game experience, none. He hasn't been on the field. And I think that could be a liability. The same way if Artie Burns can't get on the field, he's a liability. So you have William Gay out there, right? You have Ross Cockrell, who didn't have a training camp with the Steelers last year, but ended up being a contributor, but could not beat out Antoine Blake, who single-handedly gave up 25% of the Steelers' passing yards in their 30th ranked passing defense in 2015. And Antoine Blake still, he took his little act, his little traveling show down to Tennessee, Steelers South, because now apparently they want everybody. They got Mike Mularkey now as their head coach. They have Dick LeBeau as their defensive coordinator, signing guys like Sean Spence. They were even linked to maybe even bringing Troy Polamalu out of a potential retirement just a year or so ago. Antoine Blake has given up, according to Pro Football Focus, 6 catches for 113 yards and a touchdown. Just this past Saturday, he surrendered a reception every time they targeted him. This is the same guy that I said Terrell Pryor got, like, what was it, his first career catch, like a 40-yard catch or so, high 30s, low 40s. It was some type of bomb. I mean, they didn't even look away. Who was the quarterback in that game? Austin Davis in week 17. He was looking like Landry Jones. I could see his his head didn't turn. They knew where they were going with the ball. Antoine Blake was bad, and Ross Cockrell had trouble beating out Antoine Blake for this starting position last year. So you have William Gay and you have Ross Cockrell. Then you look into the slot. Now, Gay is naturally a better player, primed to play as a slot corner. I think they were going to try Senquez Golson in that position and possibly even on the outside with Artie Burns. Maybe you slide William Gay in. There are some possibilities, but with two of those names completely off the table right now. Now, Burns will likely be back, but he's going to be young and inexperienced. Sean Davis has showed us some promise. He was supposed to be a safety. He's supposed to be in contention as a starting safety. He's playing like a hybrid, and so is Robert Golden. And Robert Golden did this last season as well, where we're just playing defensive backs wherever we feel we can play them. They're on the field. We're starting to see a lot more cover 2s and cover 3s. And so this has always been a transition. This has always been linked since Tomlin came over from Tampa Bay, back when he was first signed a contract to be the Steelers head coach back in 2007. And I'm going to get to Tomlin's first year here in a second when linked to another name. But just speaking about Keenan Lewis, is there a position for Keenan Lewis? Are the Steelers in that big of dire straits? They just might be. Because I don't know. I was doing the numbers and somebody said, well, 6 corners? Well, did they consider Doran Grant a corner or a safety or both? Because they consider Sean Davis to play in both positions. I think that versatility depends on the depth chart. In fact, Shamarko Thomas probably earns himself a roster spot because there's nobody else. And Shamarko has had a few more bright spots this preseason than usual. I think everybody's going to have their up and downs, and you can't expect perfection from any player. I've seen improvement in Shamarko, at least, as to not rag on him too much. But if we had anybody that had any semblance of playing better than Shamarko Thomas. Shamarko Thomas would have been long gone. In fact, Ross Ventrone was still on the roster headed into this year too, and that guy has just been bounced around like a ping pong ball. I probably mentioned Ross Ventrone on this program as many times as he's been released and re-signed in the NFL. I mean, that's just crazy to think about. So, I mean, the Steelers went out last year and they traded for Brandon Boykin when they found out Golson was out for the whole year. Well, we know Golson probably isn't out for the whole year. There's got to be some type of decision made here soon with him and like Bruce Gradkowski. And what guy? Who do you bring back as a designated to return if you have these guys like on an injured reserve list or anything like that? I mean, there's some major decisions to be made, and this is where Keenan Lewis actually fits in. And I'm not saying Keenan Lewis is going to come in and be a starter, but I think the Steelers at least have to investigate, do their due diligence, and see, because of supposedly like a half dozen teams are interested in Lewis's services, and it gets more speculative, not only saying that he would like to come back to the Steelers when asked on that radio program, the satellite radio program that is the NFL's. I can't say the name right now, so please don't make fun of me. But when Lewis does that and he posts on Instagram that he's going from whatever area code he was to the 412 code word for Pittsburgh, the speculation begins. And there were rumors that he visited with the Steelers. There was even a rumor that came out late around the midnight hour that had already said that he had signed and welcomed back, but nothing official has leaked from any of the usual talking heads in the NFL, such as an Adam Schefter or an Ian Rappaport. So still holding our breath as to this, but if Keenan Lewis if he's that banged up and bad and out of shape and whatnot, I mean, the Steelers, number one, aren't going to touch him. I don't know what kind of deal they would give him to begin with, maybe a 1 year. But I don't know. Bringing Keenan Lewis back, a guy with experience, 30 years old. I mean, what is William Gay now? William Gay's like 31, I want to say. And he's played some of his best football since returning to the Steelers. I don't necessarily know. Maybe Keenan Lewis, with his experience, could at least help some of the younger guys. And if he's just a fill-in or a rotation guy for the time being, he adds some depth, maybe some comfort, an emergency-type role. I'm not looking for these guys to jump in and be on the starting 11 every week just right off of the street. But Keenan Lewis really wasn't right off of the street. I really don't know the situation in New Orleans, but apparently he did not get along with Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator over in New Orleans with the Saints, and apparently that is part of why Keenan Lewis saw his release. And then, of course, being banged up the previous year and unavailable to that team will do that. It's the what have you done for me lately league, and that's the way a lot of people think and the way they look at these things. But who else are we going to get? I mean, we've already seen what some of these corners are, like Montel Garner or Jordan Dangerfield. If the Steelers are going to keep 10 DBs, which is about the right number that they have there, and you're going to say that Grant or Davis is like more of a safety hybrid or something like that, so you have like maybe 4 safeties and 6 corners if you list it like that, or if Grant's a safety, then it's 5 and 5. I think there's a spot for Keenan Lewis because none of these other guys excite me. This reminds me of Kevin Fogg and B.W. Webb from last year. We were so desperate for a corner. The only guy we got was Golson, and then we didn't even have him. You had Brandon Boykin, and you didn't even use him. It's like you just they can't. How much more wrong can you possibly go at this position than to get somebody that's at least done something for you in the past and is familiar with everything? Pretty much there's no major change from Keith Butler. He's familiar. Keenan Lewis is familiar with Keith, having been here for many years in Dick LeBeau's system. And, of course, Carnell Lake, the secondary coach. I say to have a look. See if he's healthy. If he could pass a physical, then this might be a square peg for a square hole as opposed to a square peg for a round hole if he's injured and can't recover, which seems to be, who knows what's going on with Ladarius Green right now. But we should have a little bit more news on that coming up as well. However, the other big story that came out, and I said I would get to Tomlin's first year as a head coach, his first ever draft pick, Lawrence Timmons, the news that comes out wasn't exactly news about him, but it is news that could affect Timmons. That is, Vince Williams signs a 3-year contract just the other day, and now that means the inside linebacker will be here, and Timmons could be a free agent next season. Apparently, there's been some breakdown in talks between Lawrence Timmons' agent and the Pittsburgh Steelers front office because, as we've discussed here, maybe about a month ago, I had Nick Signorelli on. We were talking about the whole Le'Veon Bell situation. Then we talked about free agent priorities. And I think the number one priority we had mentioned was David DeCastro, which is being discussed right now. There's a lot of pay-the-man articles and rumors and things that are going out there. But I guess the talks with Vince Williams began during training camp. And Lawrence Timmons, the reason this affects Lawrence Timmons, obviously, is he's been in the league for a decade now. This is his 10th season. And he was a Tomlin original, so you would think he would just be here, but he has been in a rotation. He's been coming off the field here or there. And as myself and Nick had discussed, I don't know that the Steelers want to pay Lawrence Timmons the kind of money that Lawrence Timmons has been getting paid. Obviously, if he is not an every down linebacker like he used to be, then his value has diminished as far as a monetary and financial value. I've always mentioned this on the show. A lot of this has as little to do with football as anything. This is a business. We're talking about bank accounts on both sides and what can someone afford versus what someone's willing to take. And that's kind of where this Keenan Lewis deal is. Can they afford to offer him something that's fair, and for how long? Doesn't look like they're paying some of these guys a whole lot of money. If you look at some of the recent contracts with some of the corners, such as a Will Gay, this is almost like the same way they lost Keenan Lewis the first go-round. And they have some major fires to put out for potential free agency here in the future. We're always hearing about paying Antonio Brown. He still has another year left on his contract. However, DeCastro previously mentioned does not. He's currently operating under his 5th-year option from his rookie contract. He is a Pro Bowl player and one heck of a guard that needs to be secured. And then on the other hand, we have Le'Veon Bell, who knows whatever is going to happen in that situation. I think the Steelers want to feel comfortable that he's not smoking the ganja. And with Bell, he's always finding some type of loophole or whatever to get these suspensions reduced. It's almost like he's an exception to the rule now twice, because the first time he fell in between them changing this whole protocol and all the rules with the drug policy. Now this time, apparently, and it hasn't been made public, there was something else that happened, and we don't know what that is, but the NFL reduced it just one game. There was some type of compromise, and if he screws up again, he's not going to get the 10-game suspension. He's going to get the 4-game suspension, and you just kind of do what? So if the Steelers feel the need to do anything long-term, they're going to need some money in the bank, and they're going to need it in order to secure some of these players for the long haul with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and maybe that final window of Big Ben and trying to win some more Lombardi trophies. Does Keenan Lewis fit into that picture for this year? I'm not sure. It's somebody that I could say yes and I could say no to. It all depends. If he's healthy, he could contribute. He may be, and sadly, may be an upgrade over the other available options in that secondary right now. And then, of course, going forward, what happens? I mean, we have Vince Williams now, so this is some security. If Shazier or Timmons gets hurt, I don't like looking beyond even this season. It's even hard to look into next month, let alone next season, as to what the Steelers will do at the linebacker position, because, of course, Jarvis Jones will be a free agent as well. All these things are being taken into consideration by Kevin Colbert and his people, and they are, trust me, they are hard at work on putting the best possible football product out there on the field. So this is the reason why we talk about all of these different things. We talk about Keenan Lewis visiting Pittsburgh and some of the speculative things. And I know sometimes I get teased. I know I got teased about Michael Vick. We still don't know what's going on with the quarterback situation. We now have a guy who was the camp arm with a fractured thumb, or fractured bone in his thumb, I think is the medical medical dictionary definition of that term. And now he's not going to be playing in this third preseason game. They bring in a kid named Bryn Renner, who I believe is now on his 5th NFL roster, having not made an active roster, always been in on practice squads or training camp and whatnot. I think this is his 3rd year in the league. I think he came in 2014, so this is his 5th roster. I'm not even sure that I expect him to throw passes on Friday. Big Ben should be playing. I know Antonio Brown said he wants to play as well. Mike Tomlin says that Le'Veon Bell will be out there. Artie Burns, a question mark. I've heard he's going to play. I've heard he's not going to play. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there as well. But just open your mind. Try to see what's the best available options out there. If the best quarterback that you could sign off the heap right now of guys that are free agents is Bryn Renner, and you haven't heard of him, and he's on his 5th NFL roster. And it's nothing against Renner. You never know. You never know. Could be a solid player. Could be better than Landry Jones. Never know. I'm just saying that the odds are against this young man as far as making this roster, and the odds are that the Steelers don't have very many other better options at all of these different positions of need right now. So they definitely have to sort out who's healthy at linebacker. They have to sort out who's healthy as far as your corners and your safeties and everyone in the secondary. Just think of this. The last 3 years in a row, they have grabbed somebody off the waiver wire before the regular season has started, somebody that had been cut from another training camp. Originally, it was Antoine Blake from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then it was Bryce McCain, who came over from the Houston Texans. And last year, Ross Cockrell from the Buffalo Bills. So if they could do a good deal and everything works out, once again, glass half full, not glass half empty with Keenan Lewis, hey, this might save us from getting yet another waiver wire body to just throw back there. And maybe this will improve this 30th best. That's not really best, is it? When you're near the bottom and only 2 teams were worse than you as far as passing defense last season. But ladies and gentlemen, once again, I am sounding like a broken record talking about these guys. It'll be interesting to see how the Vince Williams contract plays in with Lawrence Timmons, and should Lawrence Timmons stick around and be a lifetime Steeler. You never know. Some of these guys are taking the money and running. There's nothing to say that Lawrence Timmons may not retire next year. I mean, many of us may have thought that Heath Miller was at the end of his tenure last year, played 10 years in the league. Hey, Lawrence Timmons, 10 years coming up right now. So it's very much so a possibility. Actually, I want to say I'm off a year there, but my apologies. Everything is fuzzy when you're drinking a lot of NyQuil and trying to get this stuff done. I apologize, but you know the point that I'm trying to make there. Lawrence Timmons still a Steeler? I don't know. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, be safe, be good, and I will catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.